All right, hey, I just wanted to check in because I finished another book, Finders Keepers by Stephen King. This is the second book in the Mr. Mercedes Bill Hodges trilogy, whatever, and it was good. The story of this one actually feels largely separate from the series, and I don't know if this is the case, but it honestly feels like he had this whole story mapped out and then kind of shoe-inned the Hodges stuff into it. And I'll get into that in this review, but we'll just start out with saying the premise of the book. So, a family of four lived together during the job market crisis, and the dad is one of the ones who gets injured from the Mr. Mercedes incident from the first one, so he is suffering from those injuries and not able to work, and it puts a big strain on the marriage, and there's always fights, and the kids hear the fights, and it takes a big toll on the whole family. It's very real that way, and it's I like the way he wrote that. Honestly, all of the stuff that doesn't have to do with Bill Hodges in this, I really liked. So one day, the son, Pete, he comes across a trunk in like kind of near their backyard. They have a big area out back that kind of leads over to the old abandoned rec center, and along that way, he finds a trunk which has a bunch of money and a bunch of notebooks in it. So he takes that and he slowly starts sending $500 a month, I believe it was, to his family anonymously. So he'll go and take $500, put it in an envelope, and put their name and address and stuff on it, and then go put it in a random post office box, so that it would show up, and the family would just keep kind of having this little bit of money to help them through the hard recession and the hard times of obviously him not being able to work on top of the recession that had hit. So now I'm going to cut back a little bit to how the trunk even got there in the first place. There is a man named Morris Bellamy who has an unhealthy obsession with this one man named John Rothstein's books, the Jimmy Gold trilogy. There's 3 books made, and the first 2 he loves a lot, and then in the third one he feels like John Rothstein didn't do the character justice and fucked him over in the end, and he's pissed about it. He cared a lot about these characters to the point where he has this real rage as a 21, 22-year-old man. He's angry at John Rothstein. So he gets a couple cronies and they go to his house to steal some money. But Morris had another plan of he was killing him. He steals the money and some notebooks also, with what he believes is just one more Rothstein book to add to the Jimmy Gold now series. It ends up actually being 2 books along with some poems and other things. But Morris doesn't get to read any of it. He takes all of the notebooks, takes the money, ends up killing his other 2 friends that helped him as well, and goes back home and buries it near his backyard on the way to the rec center. It's the same house that Pete lives in, the boy who finds the trunk. He lived in that same house way back 25 years ago, something like that. And he buried it there and then went out and was trying to kind of like let everything lie down before he gets caught up with all of this money and notebooks and stuff. And so he goes out, gets drunk, and ends up raping a woman while he's drunk, and gets a life sentence actually for it. He gets out on an early parole due to kind of a good behavior sort of deal. And throughout that whole time in prison, he had just been thinking about those books, right? Those notebooks that he didn't get to read. And they're his notebooks in his eyes, and they're rightfully his. And so he immediately starts on his journey after getting out of prison to fucking get those notebooks back. And we'll cut back to the kid again, Pete. So Pete, we're now a couple years into him giving money, and the money has run dry. And he now is contemplating and trying to decide if he wants to sell these notebooks and make it public that these notebooks that he found, these were the last 2 of the Jimmy Gold series now of John Rothstein's works, and he's the only one who has read them. He read through every notebook, and he fell in love with the Jimmy Gold series too. And he doesn't want to get rid of them because of his love for the Jimmy Gold series. And he also just doesn't know if he sells them, and then people will start questioning, and then his family will get looked at, and they'll figure out where the money was coming from. And it's just a big to-do for a teenager, right? And it's a lot of pressure to put on him. And it really makes him mature very quickly throughout the book. And he's run out of money, and he decides that he is going to at least see what kind of money he'd be able to get for something kind of similar, right? Maybe he has just some notebooks of some of his poems. And so he shows the poems to this sketchy book dealer, this sketchy bookstore owner. And this bookstore owner, long story short, starts trying to blackmail him and saying, well, you have stolen property, you're going to be fucked over, I'm going to get your family in trouble, I'm going to get you in trouble. This guy, this bookstore owner, also happened to be a friend of Morris back in the day, and Morris had confided in him about all of these notebooks. He knew about them. This other guy named Andy or Andrew knew about them. So he believes Pete because he's one of the only other people that knows that these notebooks even exist. And so he really starts to try to fuck Pete over and scam him. And that's kind of where Morris will enter the picture again, because Morris makes a discovery. He goes back to the old dig site, and he goes back to the old bury site where he buried the trunk, and he discovers that the trunk is empty. And so that sets him on a rampage of trying to figure out what the fuck happened. And he thinks the only person that's living that knows about these fucking notebooks is Andrew, that bookstore owner. That is I don't want to spoil too much of the overarching story any further, because that is kind of where things start to converge and line up and big events start happening. And I don't want to spoil that in this video, but Bill Hodges kind of comes in, right? He doesn't make any impression in the first 150 pages. His name I don't think is mentioned. And I have to say that, as unfortunate as this is, I was always a little disappointed when we had to switch back to Bill Hodges and Holly and Jerome. I really like their characters. I love them a lot. But I was so invested in this story that I felt like I just wanted to have it play out a little differently. And this whole story could have played out without Bill Hodges. The whole book could have happened and been a super cool book. I think a standalone book. But I see how it also can fit into the Mr. Mercedes universe here. So I get it both ways, but I really just didn't feel like this needed to be a part of the Bill Hodges series. I don't know if I'm the only one. I felt like it was a shoo-in. I don't know if it was, but I really don't feel like that was the original idea with this story. I don't think he was meant to be in this. But that is kind of the overarching premise of the story. I really did like this book. I liked the buildup of Morris being in prison and him thinking about these books, and that's all that's on his mind for those 25 years. And meanwhile, Pete comes across him and has a whole different experience because he's using the money and he doesn't know really what was happening at the time. And I like when it kind of reveals that Pete has read the notebooks and that he has fallen in love with the stories and stuff. I really like that whole moment too, just this converging of, oh, I see where this is gonna be big. It's really fun. It's a good read. I enjoyed all of it all the way through. Like I said, there maybe could have done without the Bill Hodges, but it's written now, and it didn't take away from the story too much. I just felt like it wasn't super. I just almost wish it was something else, if that makes sense. But overall, highly recommend this book. I do think that it's worth reading Mr. Mercedes, and I think that it's. I think I liked this more than Mr. Mercedes, than the first book in the series, which is a great thing, and it makes me excited to read End of Watch, which is the next book in the series, and I think I'm going to try to pick that up this next month and finish off the Bill Hodges trilogy, and then I believe it goes into like Holly and some of the other books that kind of loosely tie in with this stuff too. I'm not 100% sure, but regardless, I appreciate y'all for sticking around and watching this video, and thanks.